You're listening to Torpedofish Radio, crossing the great divide between one mind and another. I'm Maddie Groves, and this is episode number 1. Leonard Bernstein said that music can name the unnameable and communicate the unknowable. And so what better way to start this off than to have on two people who do just that. Stephanie Bettman and Luke Halpin bring to their musical partnership a variety of influences. Stephanie is a classically trained vocalist and violinist who graduated from Oberlin Conservatory. And Luke grew up listening to songwriters like Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson, and he taught himself how to play the mandolin. So their music is not easy to categorize. I asked them if what they do could be considered bluegrass, but before we hear their response, let's listen to a track called Buttonwillow. This is on their new CD, It All Comes Back to Love. This is Stephanie Bettman and Luke Halpin. Talk about that.
Talk about Buttonwillow. Buttonwillow was the opening lick of that song. Like the first 16 notes of that thing was just a lick that I had for a couple years that was just sort of popping up all the time, and it wouldn't go away. And finally I was like, the only way to put this thing to rest is just to expand it out and turn it into its own song, and then I don't have to worry about playing it anymore. Fight! Anyway, so I think I went to the store and bought a little bottle of Chivas and finished the song, which is how I used to finish everything back in the day.
Right.
Oh, the good old days. Longing. Anyway, and so I wrote the tune, and it was done, and then, the how this title came about is I never actually performed it. I just had it done, and it was sitting there, and I didn't know what it was called, and I was driving up to San Francisco one day, and about the halfway point between L.A. and San Francisco was the turnoff for Buttonwillow.
All right, that's the name of it.
The name of a town. And I saw the sign. I was like, for some reason, I saw that word, and I was like, that is the title of my instrumental.
Wow, I always wonder how instrumentals get their titles.
Most of them are named after towns or streets.
Really?
I don't know.
And,
I don't know.
Is there? I'm trying to think of. Is there any improvisation when you perform that, or is it
not anymore? I used to keep it real loosey goosey. I mean, I read a quote once from who's the famous jazz violinist that played with Django?
Stefan Grappelli.
Stefan Grappelli, thanks. Yeah, I read a book of his, and he said, when it comes to jazz, you play the head at the beginning, and you play the head at the end, and then whatever happens in the middle is no one's business but your own.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was really great. And so I used to do that to that song, but in the evolution of doing it, the funny thing is that song, I've done it in 3 different bands, this being the third one, and it was cool, but it never actually really worked really well with, dobros and guitars and basses and stuff. Now on the record, of course, we have bass and percussion, but we originally wrote the song just for the 2 instruments, for fiddle and mandolin. It took creating it just for the 2 instruments for it to really come to life and figuring out how the parts intertwined, and then that started dictating wanting the parts to be sort of the same. Kept the instrumental a little loosey-goosey, and then I started coming up with some cool stuff that I was like, I'm going to leave it. So I pretty much play it note for note. Just because it's fun, but
I think I heard a version of it, a live-ish version of just the 2 of you doing it, and I thought it was amazing. I'm just looking at your schedule, and I recognize a lot of the names as definitely folk venues, but is it unusual for you to do a bluegrass festival as such?
Well, unusual, like I said, we haven't really played that many festivals, so
or bluegrass
nothing
venue.
is usual. We've done some of the bluegrass venues here in LA. We've done several concerts through the Bluegrass Association of Southern California, and we're really not bluegrass straight up, but we definitely have an influence.
We can tailor our show to being a little bluegrass heavy if we want it to.
We have some tunes that I guess that I've written. You haven't really written any straight up bluegrass tunes.
I'm the more bluegrass influence as far as playing goes, but I've never written a bluegrass song.
I've written several actual like bluegrass tunes. So some of our songs are like totally in that genre, but a lot of them aren't. So, but we've played the Topanga Banjo Fiddle Contest a few years in a row, and I guess that's a bluegrass festival.
So how do you go about tailoring your set to a bluegrass audience? Like, what constitutes a bluegrass song as opposed to a different kind of song? What are the ingredients that seem to be necessary for song to be bluegrass?
Up tempo and the strategically placed 2 major chord.
Really? Is that true?
Well, that's not how I think about it when I write them. But,
that's what I think.
That's how Luke thinks about it. It just sounds like a bluegrass song. Like
you know, if you play one of the up tempo bluegrass songs that we do, and then you follow it up with any one of our ballads that's being played on a fiddle and an acoustic guitar, you don't really notice the difference. Yeah. I mean,
and our instrumentation. Most often Luke and I play as a duo, but I guess we are talking about music, aren't we?
Well, and you know what? I was just thinking. This is one of those "what is" questions because I'm trying to think.
What is bluegrass?
I know bluegrass when I hear it. I think. I mean, okay, it involves a certain vocal style, I suppose. I mean, sometimes.
We don't ever really do that, like the whole
high lonesome
sound. Yeah, we don't really do that.
It usually often involves mandolin.
Yes.
A certain bass type. Well, you don't have a bass, but
we do sometimes.
Okay.
We do have a bass player who.
There's definitely distinctive bass. Style.
I think for me, because I get asked that question all the time. What is bluegrass? What's the difference between bluegrass and country? And it is, if you're going between bluegrass and country, that's pretty easy because you can start deciphering between electric instruments and just acoustic instruments. But when you're listening to a bluegrass band, the thing that lays it out for me, I think the most distinguishing factor is a real bluegrass band always has a banjo.
Okay.
It's kind of like
which
cranking.
we never have, so therefore we are not real bluegrass.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that the banjo is limited to bluegrass, obviously, because Bela Fleck proved that beyond all measure. But that is an element. I mean, you can so many different styles of fiddle.
But I think that there's bluegrass as the main, like the bluegrass that is the traditional bluegrass that you hear when you listen to the bluegrass station written on the radio. It's actually pretty narrow. It's a pretty narrow field. So, it either sounds like bluegrass or it doesn't. And bluegrass, you got the slow songs and you got the fast songs, and they either sound like those bluegrass songs or they are not bluegrass.
I'm realizing now, too, bluegrass is the one genre in which it will sound happy, and we're talking about killing someone by the river.
That's true. That's true. In fact, I did get that quote once that from the first album, a gal said I had that talent for taking a dark lyric and pairing it with an upbeat song, that bluegrass talent. Which I do tend to do sometimes.
Another tradition I associate with bluegrass is taking songs from another genre and doing them as bluegrass, like Dolly Parton.
Right.
I guess that's one instance in which, because she's so famous as a country singer, when she does a bluegrass album, that really puts it into sharp relief that this is different and how it's different. But didn't she do Stairway to Heaven?
Yeah,
I think
she did.
Yeah, so they often do that. What would be the tradition that you would say you come out of primarily?
Sorry. Anyway, sorry.
Starving artist tradition. That is literally a starving artist right here.
Okay, question again.
What would be the tradition that what?
Well, most many musicians, even if their style, as they're currently performing it, doesn't betray any influence of this, there's probably a tradition that they come out of, and I know that you two probably come out of different traditions musically.
We do, actually, ironically.
We shouldn't even technically get along at all.
What do you mean? What does that mean? Do you want to explain that?
Yes, what does that mean, Luke?
musically, we come from totally different places. As far as Stephanie did the whole conservatory, classical music, violin, classical, vocal, classical, train,
classical.
read music, don't know what chords are, and just sort of melodic oriented.
I had 4 years of theory.
Memorization theory oriented playing, which is one way of doing it. And then I grew up with the dad handing you a mandolin and a Melbe book saying, learn how to play this instrument, you're in my band. And then so I taught myself.
But you still learned out of a book, it sounds like.
Yeah, for a little while, just to learn the chords and stuff.
Well, but he also did a lot of sitting around, like
learning
bluegrass jams. And he tells this story about, the first jam you went to.
Oh, I can tell this story live on air because it's a podcast. So I was I'm like 12 or something like that, and it was about 2 a.m, and I have no idea why my parents were letting me hang out with all these drunk people by myself this late. But I was standing around a campfire, and it pretty much dwindled down to me and 3 other guys, and one of these guys was this really, really drunk banjo player. And I was just pretty good at playing the fiddle, but still trying to figure out how to improvise. And figuring that if they asked me, do you know, I can't remember which song it was, but Gold Rush or something like that. And I was like, I don't know it. He's like, you know it, it's a fiddle tune, you have to know it. And he gets up in my face, and he starts playing the song, and he plays the song, and he's just reeking of booze, breathing in my face. Literally, he's like right in my face, and all of a sudden he finishes the banjo part, and he like turns to me, it's my turn to start playing, and I'm like, and he just goes, he gets right in my face and says, play the fucking fiddle! And I just went, and I just started sawing on the strings as hard as I could, and I just played every single note you could possibly think of that somehow related maybe to the key of A. And that was literally the biggest breakthrough for me. I was like, holy crap, that's fiddle playing. Just start sawing and then eliminate the notes that sound bad eventually.
You know what? A lot of musicians have stories like that. Like, didn't that happen to Charlie Parker? I believe a drummer threw a cymbal at him, and did you have any experience like that, or somebody?
Oh well,
sing the fucking aria.
The classical world does not quite. I did have a violin teacher though when I was in middle school, and the first part of high school, who she used to walk out of my lessons.
Oh, shoot,
leave me crying. She used to, this was pretty harsh. She accused me once of playing my violin like a cheese box. At the time, I wasn't really sure what
the
that
heck is
meant.
A cheese box?
I'm not sure. I still don't know. I've imagined, in my brain, I'm imagining it's like, like a bread box or something.
But
something
still
equally musical.
Okay. Maybe that was your koan to work on. You have to figure that out. So, how old were you when this happened?
Oh, 14.
And how long?
15, maybe.
How long had you been playing the violin at that point?
I started so let's see, 7 years.
Okay, so you started playing violin when you were 7.
It's about time for a nice moldy cheese element to kick in.
And you, when you went to Oberlin, did you start out as were you a vocal major?
I was there as a voice major, yeah.
And did you apply as a voice major?
Yeah.
So you had to audition?
Yeah.
And was there any time where you contemplated going as a violin major or something?
No, I never liked to practice the violin well enough to really... In fact, I even told my violin teacher in high school, this is not the person who told me I played it like a cheese box, this was somebody else entirely. I mentioned to him that I wanted to go to Oberlin Conservatory of Music, and he said, well, you can't get in, can you? And he was speaking as a violinist, and I said, I'm going to go as a singer. Oh, okay.
That's how classical musicians...
Yeah.
That's their version of hazing.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's a gentler, seemingly gentler.
And was it true?
Quieter kind of hazing.
Was there any truth? Did you feel like he was...
Well, considering that the violin majors that I knew at Oberlin practiced, 8 hours a day, yeah, he was right. I didn't want to do that. It wasn't for me.
So, how many hours a day did you practice as a singer?
Well, see, as a singer, you weren't allowed to practice more than
Excellent.
a few hours,
Lucky.
a couple hours, because you would, get vocally tired.
And okay, so on your website, you specify that means opera. Studying voice means studying opera. So,
Well, that's what I did. Not everybody, but
oh,
that's what I
okay,
did.
for you and
But at Oberlin, that's what it meant.
oh, studying opera as
Yeah.
opposed to
Musical theater
okay, and
or pop.
what were some of the operas that you? What are some of the operas that you've performed in? As not just doing the repertoire on a stage with a piano, but
Marriage of Figaro.
Uh-huh.
Oh no, not Marriage. Magic Flute.
okay.
I actually. Oh gosh, what else did I do at Oberlin?
Or just anywhere, actually, because
Well, I was in La Boheme.
Oh, really? What did you play?
I wasn't one of the main roles. I was in
Uh-huh.
the chorus. I did the lead in an opera that few people have heard of called Giants in the Earth, which is a one-act opera written by the same guy, Douglas Moore, who wrote The Ballad of Baby Doe. That's his most
wow.
famous
Uh-huh.
opera.
Huh.
I did that.
And did you do those while you were at Oberlin, or?
That I did actually after Oberlin at the University of New Mexico, post-grad.
Okay. So, what? Tell me about that. How did you end up there?
I don't know. How did I end up? I'm from New Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And I'd graduated and I guess I hadn't quite figured out. I'm trying to remember the timeline of my life. I guess I hadn't figured out quite where to go.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot. I guess it must have happened prior to living in Chicago. Yeah.
How did you end up?
It's all a blur.
Wow.
And you know what?
That
I was.
was fascinating.
You have a song called "Leaving New York." Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I wrote that when I lived in Chicago.
Really? Uh huh.
Yeah, that's really the first song I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with a trio of gals. We called ourselves Sweet Accord. And we were mostly a cover band, sort of a acoustic folk cover band, and we played country and folk rock kind of covers. But I was always sort of interested in writing songs, and I kind of developed in that group, and I wrote that song when I was in that group. And I had friends in New York at the time, and so I had visited New York a lot, and that sort of struck me at one time when I was coming back home to Chicago. But we never ended up performing it, and then it was one of those songs that just kind of hung around. When I got out here,
it's a good song.
Well, thanks. When I got out here, it still was kind of in my brain and sort of in the ether, and so I worked it up with a couple different bands, and we finally figured out a pretty cool arrangement with the current group of guys that I work with. Well, Luke and I don't tend to do it very much as a duo, but when we have our bass player, we'll do it because it's got some harmony stuff that takes 3 singers.
You know what I find interesting about that story is that, particularly in the folk world, I think there's sort of a mythology about the singer, songwriter, troubadour. Everything you write is going to be about your own experience, and that's going to be more authentic. And I think that in reality, especially in musical history, a lot of the songs that really speak to people are songs that people wrote in a cubicle, smoking cigarettes under a deadline, and you're just talking about kind of a song you wrote as almost like, it sounds like kind of almost like an exercise or something where
That does happen, yeah.
And so when you write songs now, do you have a method or do you just, to me, it seems like it would require a lot of discipline. Like, how do you make yourself do it? Or maybe you don't have to. I don't know.
Well, if I had more discipline in that arena, I'd probably write more songs. I've been so busy with business stuff lately, I haven't actually been writing a ton of songs. Now, currently, with the booking of tours being the first priority on my to-do list on a daily basis, I really only write songs when they're undeniable. and they're kind of occurring to me, and they just keep repeating in my head, or like part of it keeps repeating, and I know, okay, I just got to sit down and I just got to put this on paper. And what happens then is usually whatever the kernel is, that part happens, and then the rest of it is either it just sort of flows out in whatever way it flows out, or it's more of a push. It's like, all right, well, I got something here, so what does it actually want to be? But yeah, writing songs, it's really, it's very different. Like I just wrote a song that was an assignment, actually. One of the conferences we just recently did, one of the things they do is they just have you pick a song assignment out of a jar, and then you just sort of stew on that for a couple of days and have to have a song written by the end of the conference. And so I did that, and songs occur in so many different ways. One of my most requested songs, one of the songs that sells the most albums, is a song that I wrote because of something I heard somebody say third hand,
What song is that?
I'm not sure I want to tell you.
Why? Do you think it'll ruin the Disney magic?
Yeah. Well,
really?
No. Well, probably not. The Letting Go. That it is a personal song in that it's about something everybody deals with, which is letting go of stuff that happens in life that's not necessarily pleasant.
They all end up personal.
On. Of course, because it comes through the personal filter.
Yeah, you know.
Have you written a lot of songs together?
No,
only a couple.
Maybe 2 or 3.
And which songs are those?
Fiddler's Bend, which made number 3 on Folk DJ Radio. Woohoo! We rock!
Yay.
And a song called The Sound of Time.
Yeah. Which also, it's pretty impacting.
It's a pretty intense song.
Have a pretty strong reaction to that
Those
song.
Those are the two that we actually perform. Yeah. And then there's like one other, right? One other one, really. Yeah. We write so differently.
What does that mean? Differently in terms of?
I write very, to me, it's not inspired. I've written 2 songs that felt inspired, where all of a sudden I just wrote a bunch of stuff. But usually it's like, okay, I'm going to write a song now.
So
what's it going to be about? Okay, I'm going to put this on a piece of paper. Oh, that sort of sucks. Let me cut that to pieces and make that into, that part can be a verse, that part can be a chorus. Oh, wait a minute, that sounds more like a bridge. Let's put it over there, wait for later. It's just
one of the biggest differences is that Luke is a guitar player. I mean, I don't really play a chordal instrument. I play the fiddle. I mean, I can fumble on a piano well enough after the fact to figure out the chords I want, but I can't use it to compose. Whereas Luke will start with his guitar often, and
sometimes,
he'll come up with a chord progression that he likes, where I can't do that. So I always start with words and melody in my brain.
But Luke, you're sort of saying you never have those kernels.
It'll start every once in a while. It'll start off as a kernel, or I love writing a song based off of what I think is the song title.
Are there any that you have on any of these albums that were like that?
On this album, well, The Sound of Time, which we ended up writing together, I actually wrote a rough draft of it on my own, and then I brought it to Stephanie, and then she had enough ideas that it was like, holy crap, and then we just totally tore it apart and basically rewrote it from, the chorus essentially stayed the same, but then all the verses were totally different. And we were sitting around with my uncle, and there was just a moment of silence, and I heard this clock ticking, and it was sort of, he started telling a story about he keeps the clock, the loud clock. His wife had passed away a year ago, my aunt, and he liked the sound of the clock because it kept him, felt like it was activity happening in the house, and just that idea made me think of the sound of the clock ticking, which ends up being the first line of the chorus, and I thought of the phrase "the sound of time," which seemed like, wow, that's pretty killer. So went back and wrote the rough draft, and that one felt pretty inspired, but I was in an inspiring situation. I'm talking to my uncle about my aunt and all these sorts of things. But on this album, did you ask if I had an inspired one or a non-inspired one?
No, you said that you had sometimes written songs based on an idea of a song title.
Oh yeah, Moonlit Night on this record is just a complete utter exercise. And
I love that song.
Thank you.
I love it. I do. I think that's got to be like one of my favorite songs in the whole thing, because maybe it's because just my taste happens to be more. I mean, it's in a clear kind of genre, but it's got, you can hear that it's got craftsmanship in it, and it's singable.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, it's a great song.
That was my attempt to write. If I was going to try to write a well-written song, like a craft, I just finished reading a songwriting book, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, let me try one. And I came up with the title, On a Moonlit Night. And I thought, okay, I need to repeat that a couple times in the chorus, and I need to have the melody sort of relate to it, go off the melody one time. I literally was like super analytical about it, and I wrote that chorus pretty fast. And then that's all I had for about a year and a half. About a year and a half later, I took it to a friend of mine, and I said, I got this chorus, I don't know what to do with it. And I sang him the chorus. Well, I said, I kind of know what to do with it, but I don't want to take the time. So I sang him the chorus, and literally as fast as it took him to write what is now the second verse, I never changed a word. He listened to it and said, give me a piece of paper, and he wrote word for word what's now the second verse and handed it to me. And I said, awesome. And then that sat around for another year and a half.
Wow.
And then I eventually said, okay, I guess I better finish the song. And so I said, okay, I just got to get to the chorus. So I wrote a first verse pretty fast. I mean, probably in actual writing time, it took 40 minutes to write that song, but it took me 4 years to sort of piece it together.
What songwriting book was it that you had been reading?
I think that one, I don't remember. It was Sheila Davis was the author. I'm thinking it was called, I can't remember what it was actually called, but it's whatever Sheila Davis's most famous songwriting book was, her first one anyway. I really like the John Boheme book, The Craft and Business of Songwriting, which is really good.
I was wondering if you have any particular songwriting heroes, or who do you think are some of the great songwriters?
Well, I still feel that Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson are high up on the list, but and I'm not sure how much of that is influenced by my dad was a huge Merle Haggard fan, so I grew up listening to a lot of Merle Haggard. But I mean, I love Lyle Lovett, and if I'm every once in a while, I got really into Townes Van Zandt for a while too. I guess I'm kind of sort of an old country guy when it boils down to it, when all's said and done. But I have some new. Stephanie turned me on to Patty Griffin a couple of years ago, who I'd never listened to, and that's kind of blown my mind and sort of changed the way I want to write. I've written one song since I decided I wanted to try to experiment with allowing myself to...
I'm this opinion over here, like, no.
But I got one song that I found myself going in a weird direction, and normally I would have censored myself, or I would have just said, I don't know what the song's about, doesn't make any sense. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to let it flow, and I let it flow, and it ends up being a great song. It's not on the record because I wrote it after the record, but if I hadn't have been listening, are you not a Patty Griffin fan?
No.
How come you're not a Patty Griffin fan?
I don't know.
Really?
Is it the songs or the voice?
It's partly the voice.
Are you a Melissa Etheridge fan?
No, I mean, I'm not a non-fan, but
do you like any women?
Yeah, I like
Mary Chapin Carpenter.
Yeah.
I think Janice Ian is a fine songwriter.
I'm not familiar with her. I keep hearing her name.
Loretta
need to check
Lynn is an amazing songwriter. I don't like anything that smacks of that like new folk kind of whatever came out of New York in the 80s. I mean, I don't think Patty Griffin is necessarily like that.
Right.
But I've heard enough of her. I've had people push her on me enough times to know that I don't like her, and then not believe that I didn't like it.
So you more of like a storytelling songwriter? Like you want to hear a story?
I want to hear a melody. I really don't give a crap about the lyrics, to be honest.
She doesn't really do melody. That's true.
That's to me the most important thing. And the lyrics...
I mean, she does meandering melody
lines,
I
hate that.
Yeah.
But this isn't about me.
It can be.
I mean, because one of the things I like about you guys is that you have strong melodies. And, we were talking yesterday, Stephanie and I were talking about, like, what genre are you? What are you? And I hadn't listened to your music at all. And what I really hear... is a Western style of folk music that I really recognize as distinct from what I'm more familiar with from like most
Western meaning
East
West Coast or
yes. Yes. Like I'm hearing like Mary McCaslin.
Really?
Laurie Lewis. We were talking about her. I don't know what it is. It might have been that song, your song, Moonlit. What's it called again?
Moonlit Night.
Because that has a definite like Latin feel to it, which is and even like Western. And you don't do Western swing, but you have some of those double fiddle kind of things. There's just a certain ethos about songwriting that to me, I associate with the West Coast in particular. With strong melodies, and a lot of the folk artists have a strong bluegrass influence. You know, Kathy Kallick, I think she's a great songwriter. It's just, to me, it's really different.
When the sky is clear, it can mean only one thing. I have to get home to you before it gets too late. Because I know what's to come, and you'll be there waiting for me. When there's not a cloud around, I need to be with you after the sun goes down. On a moonlit night, I love to hold you near. On a moonlit night, it's all so clear. I don't need anything but you to make everything right. On a moonlit night.
Tonight as I look at you, you captivate my soul.
And the thought of our love is so deep, it feels so home. In your eyes I see the warmth, the fire from when we first met. And the sight of the moon takes us to a place we will never forget. On a moonlit night, I love to hold you. On a moonlit night, it's all so clear. I don't need anything but you to make everything right. On a moonlit night. On a moonlit night, I love to hold you near. On a moonlit night, it's all so clear. I don't need anything but you to make everything right. On a moonlit
You really do sound like Joan Baez.
Boy, I get that a lot. I get that so
Now,
much.
Did you listen to
no,
Joan Baez?
I really didn't. I really didn't.
Have you since you've been talking?
Oh, only a little bit. You know, it certainly occurred to me every time somebody says, "Oh my gosh, you sound so much like Joan Baez."
Yeah.
I even got asked once, "Joan Baez must have been a huge influence for you." And actually, she wasn't. I've then gone and listened to a few songs here and there, and sometimes I hear it. I actually heard on the radio one day they played some Joan Baez song, and I thought, oh yeah, that does sound like I do sound like that.
Well, do you think it might be that your classical training?
Maybe.
I think for sure that's what it is.
But you know, really, I've done a lot of work to get myself as a singer away from the sound that the classical training, was creating. So I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to for all the folk fans out there, I am not saying a general statement here, but folk music is not, their first focus is not singing. As a general rule, folk musicians don't, it's about the song and the lyrics and the songwriting. I mean, Bob Dylan's a perfect example of that, right?
Yeah, but who made his songs famous?
Well, that's true. There's that too. But my point is that I think one of the unique things is that you don't, and the reason she gets the Joan Baez thing a lot is because here it is. It's this obviously acoustic folk-ish type of music happening with somebody that knows how to sing. And it's not an issue of like, oh, I was born with natural talent and I've got a good voice. I mean, a lot of people have that, but she actually knows how to sing. It's like she's trained singing. She's practiced her singing as much as, I mean, I'm a great instrumentalist, but I've practiced my tail off to become one. And she's a great singer, and she's practiced her tail off to become one.
I think it's the vibrato. I mean, because that's the most distinct thing about Joan Baez's singing. That makes her really unusual. When she first came out, she had this really unusual for folk. I mean, it wasn't a matter of good or bad. It was just...
Right, well, I'm not saying good or bad, but yeah.
She had that quality of her voice with the, a definite soprano with a kind of a vibrato that you don't hear much in folk music. And
well, maybe I don't. Yeah, I think it's partly also that the definite soprano part. You don't hear a definite soprano either. Yeah. You hear you hear people who are kind of talk singing.
There's that.
Our helicopter's here. We have to go. Thank you for having us. This has been great.
So, I mean, I guess
they found us.
We were talking earlier about doing the bluegrass venue. Do you ever get any kind of? I know at least in the part of the world that I'm from on the East Coast, people feel very strongly about bluegrass, what it is, what it isn't.
Oh yes.
Have you ever gotten any kind of like, what is that? That's not
surprisingly not really.
Well, when I have applied for occasional bluegrass festivals, I have been told you're not bluegrass. So we definitely. I mean, I'm aware that we don't fit the mold, the definition, but I do believe that people who love bluegrass, which I love bluegrass, will really enjoy our music because it's an obvious influence. But it's just, but the thing that gets me about the whole bluegrass thing is that when Bill Monroe created the genre, what he did was he took a lot of music from the folk, from, the Appalachians and just what was sort of existed around him. And he put his own thing on it and created this thing that was then called bluegrass. And he promoted doing exactly that, bringing your own originality to traditional pieces. Whereas now bluegrass has become, you have to do it exactly the way Bill Monroe did it, or it's not bluegrass. And I find that sort of ironic.
It is ironic. Did he ever have anything to say about that that we know of?
I don't know.
The quote I know is actually Peter Rowan quoting Bill Monroe that says, Bill Monroe said, the best thing you can do for bluegrass music is to take it and make it your own. He was talking about David Grisman because David Grisman was playing with him. The best thing you can do is take it and create your own style, your own version of it. And that was like part of his introduction to David Grisman. And I always thought if that's a true quote, which I can't imagine he's lying just because, then of course. And why would we all want to be clones of Bill Monroe?
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic that also like folkies are can be like that.
Yeah. Yes. Well, any genre can get that.
I don't think a lot of people actually have listened to Bill Monroe in a long time. If you actually go back and listen to Bill Monroe, what he's doing is he did the blues.
Right, he was putting blues on
better than anyone else. Like now, it's like bluegrass has become even, for lack of a better word, whiter. I guess. I mean, it's just like straight, and I mean, and there's few guys that do things. But you listen to Bill Monroe's mandolin playing, and it's just the blues scale constantly being just tore apart over some major thing. It's really cool.
It's become a little prissy.
Yeah, and when I finally went back and listened, I was like, holy cow, I didn't realize that he was cooler than the current people. Or you go back and you watch Earl Scruggs on the was it the Andy Griffith show? No, Ballad of Jake Clampett show. Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
He's doing stuff back then that Bela Fleck. Everyone's going on. Bela Fleck made bluegrass jazz, banjo jazz or something. You watch Earl Scruggs on that show, and he's like, it's totally cool.
Well, you're no slouch. Talk about how you came together as artists and people and stuff.
Well, I had been. I had a 4-piece band. That's how I started, with basically a 4-piece bluegrass instrumentation kind of band. And I'd worked my way through various guitar players and bass players in town, and hadn't found the right combination of people. And I sort of got to a point after, I guess, a year and a half or so, where I was kind of frustrated. So I figured, all right, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm basically going to just find all new people. And I found a new guitar player. And he actually recommended Luke. So I called up Luke, and for the first time, I guess we'd been rehearsing together for a few months, and we'd done a couple of gigs, and then Luke says to me one night after a particularly kind of chaotic performance.
We sucked.
Well, it was
thought.
kind of a mess. Yeah, it was a little bit of a mess. He says to me, I have an idea, but I can't tell you right now what it is. So,
I was a heavy drinker back in the day, and now I was a smart one because I was aware of it, so I knew that I'd had this great idea. So but I couldn't. I don't want to talk about it until I
wait till you sober up.
Until
yeah,
he sobered
exactly.
up. Right. Well, he didn't mention that to me that night.
Maybe that's why you sucked. I don't know. It's just a wild guess.
No, I didn't suck.
Of course not. I don't suck.
Anyway, so the next day he calls me up and we're talking. I said, so what about that idea? Is it still a good idea today?
So you knew.
Right. And he said, yeah, actually it is. But I want to talk to you about it in person, so I'm going to come over. So he comes over and he says, all right, so this is what I'm thinking. I think I want to make your project my first priority. And I want to see what happens if you and I get together for a month every day and practice 2 to 3 hours a day.
Holy crap.
And and at the time,
Wow, that's the response I was expecting.
and the response that he got was more like, okay, well, all right. But I was coming from the point of view of having had multiple different musicians work with me and then just leave. It's never really commit. And so I'm thinking, okay, he says a month. He's going to give this. All right, so in a month, I might be replacing him is what I'm thinking. So, but I agreed to it. I thought it was a good idea. And I was excited that he was putting this forward. I was like, well, that would be great. Somebody who actually wants to work on the material. That's good. So we did that. And 1 month turned into 3 or 4 months of 5 days a week of 3 to 4 hour rehearsals.
Wow.
And then we start, and then we'd start having conversations. So the 4 hour rehearsal would turn into a 7 hour hang. And anyway, I think it was the foundation on which we are now standing, because that was the time period which we got to know each other. We got to know the music really well. I mean, I'd written all the music, but I hadn't had the opportunity to rehearse with a band like we were now rehearsing, to figure out harmonies, to figure out arrangements. And so when we started rehearsing with the full band, and the two of us had been putting so much time in, the bar had been raised, and the other members of the band kind of went, okay, guess I better learn the material. And so that was the beginning of us really getting our show together.
The band as a whole got pretty good too, but the problem was that while you're rehearsing as a duo and you're going over harmonies and figuring stuff out, I started playing more and more guitar just to quote unquote figure things out. But then you start getting, we were practicing so much that you start getting, in my style of playing the guitar, it's completely different than the real guitar player. A little bit, a little bit more aggressive.
So were you the mandolin player?
Yeah, I was the mandolin. So I was trying to learn these songs and practice, but then I would try to and then I would turn them over into a mandolin thing, and then it just got kind of annoying because then we were used to the song a certain way, and then I'd be like trying to tell the guitar player, who's still is a dear friend of ours, like, yeah, maybe this kind of want it this way a little bit, and anyway, just started, and then he was getting busy with some other things, and it just ended up working out that he wanted to move on, and I'd already taken over the guitar player role, which I never wanted to do. I just wanted to be a mandolin player.
So when you made this proposition, what made you want to do that? Other than what were you drinking back then?
I was drinking Jack Daniels.
Oh man, Jack Daniels has been a member of my band.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
It's part of why I quit playing music actually.
I was still smoking too, right? Yeah, I was doing it all.
Yeah, you were still.
But what did you think? Why did you think that would be a good idea? And what did you have in mind, or did you just want to get in her?
At that no.
Good graces.
That was actually not on my mind at all at that point in time.
Although, before he agreed to come and audition, quote audition, meet me, he did look me up on the internet to find out whether or not I was hot.
Yeah. You got to know who's going to be opening the door when you knock. Exactly. I mean, it's important.
What to wear?
Yeah, what
you're gonna wear? What did you wear?
I think in my mind, a bunch of things were going on. Number one is I've been in a lot of bands, And I think I was tired, and I didn't want to be in another band for a really long time and then have it not work out. So I thought, I mean, literally, I guess I didn't realize how hard that was going to sound to the person I was proposing it to. I'm going to give it a month and see how it just didn't...
But it sounds like it was just the right thing to say.
But
Well,
it
it
also
worked
was a
out.
little like,
Yeah.
it was like, we're going to give this a month trial and see if... I just thought I saw potential, but I wasn't sure if it was really there.
So you weren't sure if you could even commit to more than a month.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to, if we weren't going to get any better.
Right.
I'd been in bands before where we practiced once a week for 3 years, 3 hours once a week, and at a certain point we never got any better. I mean, I was willing to get better, but you're only as good as your worst member, right? And Stephanie at the point was new to the fiddle, as far as I was concerned. I didn't,
Right.
you know,
I
she
had
was
been making the transition from
being a classical
violin.
to, and that's a difficult thing. And what was happening was, to be honest, is we would practice. This is before I made this commitment. We would practice, and we would rock, and then we would get on stage, and then if there was one little nerve thing, the fiddle playing would completely fall apart.
Really? Even though you practiced all that?
Well, I was actually suffering from a pretty serious stage fright with my fiddle playing when I started this. And I think, I mean, I could get all psychological on you, but...
Was it guilt?
No,
No?
I think it was just pressure. I think I'd had a lot of pressure as a kid. And, you know, I grew up playing in orchestras, and you're constantly playing for chairs. You're constantly competing. You're constantly auditioning. And I was always so nerve-wracked in that, you know, set of circumstances. I think that I sort of carried that with me when I had to play in public. And I would get these terrible. I mean, I couldn't breathe. It was seriously like an anxiety attack.
And did you have that same anxiety when you played in classical situations and orchestras?
If I had to play solo, yes.
Solo.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it wasn't like, I mean, I know some violin fiddle players, violinist fiddle players who have been trained classically, sometimes they have some kind of hang up about playing fiddle.
Well, it's the
Like it's
improvising.
not real.
It's
okay.
the improvising. Because as a classical musician, you do not learn how to improvise at all. And in the world of bluegrass and sort of even country and all of that, in that world that I was determined to be in, you need to know how to play along with chord changes. You know, you need to know how to do that. That's just part of what the job is. And you know, more or less, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to know how to do it totally and completely, which, you know, that's something that I've made huge progress on, but I still, you know, have more progress I can make. It's one of those things I think you can always get better at. But so I think that was part of it too, was that what I was expecting of myself, I simply didn't know how to do yet. Plus, I was playing some very difficult solos.
Yeah, she doesn't write anything easy, you know.
Well, and at the time I was working with a fairly famous fiddle player who was helping me create some of these solos, and they were technically very difficult. And he was all excited because I could play them because I was classically trained. But, you know, under the pressure of performance, it was that much harder.
I mean, the other thing that I have to understand too, I didn't realize how much of a thing this was at the time, but Stephanie doesn't even see me this way because she's never seen me prior to meeting me. I was first and foremost primarily a fiddle player.
Oh.
And that's what I did. And I mean, I love playing the mandolin. That's like my favorite thing to play. But professionally, people knew me as a fiddle player. I got hired as a fiddle player.
Is that
Luke
who you were
Halpin, the
playing
fiddle player.
with Merle Haggard and
Yeah,
Steve
yeah.
Miller? And...
all those things. And so I think there was an issue there going on in my mind too, that like, you know, I mean, that was an added element of the whole psychological thing is...
Well, but I want to say that it wasn't just that the fiddle playing would occasionally crash and burn, which did happen, but the band itself didn't really know the songs. That was the problem.
Oh, that.
So, you know, I remember you,
there's
Luke,
that true.
saying
Yeah.
to me after, I guess it was Viva Fresh or something, you later reported to me that it's just simply not fair.
I told
because
you.
I was so new at it, and I was dealing with so many of my own nerve issues that having a band that couldn't really support, you know, he felt like that just wasn't fair. Like the least they could do was know the songs. So, and that was another.
Now I wasn't playing at that point. I've always, you know, being fiddle and mandolin. I show up to bands I've never met, and I don't have to know the chords. You play the chords correctly, and I'll follow along. That was how I did it. And even in that, so that's how I was a little loosey-goosey, and I'm not going to learn them real well because I don't need to learn them because the guitar players learn them, and I'm not a chordal player. I'm just playing fills. But no one was learning the chords, and then I would find myself trying to compensate on, like, the mandolin, trying to be the rhythm player.
Oh, God.
And finally, I think I actually did talk to him at one point, like, look, this is just not fair. She's trying to present her music. She's new. She's trying to do this thing, and now we're making it even more challenging by not knowing what we're doing.
And you know what? There's so much pressure on the. I mean, you were the front person.
Yes. Yeah, and I was learning how to do that, too.
And you know what? Sarah Vaughan didn't have to arrange all of her songs. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot to be said for a singer having a music director, you know, which is kind of what you were volunteering for, whether you knew it at the time. I mean,
yeah, a band leader kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and then you can just write the songs and sing them, and there's nothing wrong with that. Why do you have to do everything, you know?
Amen.
Yeah. So I know that, like, we could probably talk all day.
Probably.
But I'm curious as to how you ended up in L.A.
I came to L.A. for the movie business, for the acting. I was an actor at the time. And I'd been in New York, and I was doing some stage stuff, but I didn't like the city of New York. I mean, I respect the city of New York, but it wasn't for me. I needed sunshine. I needed nature. I needed space, none of which exists in Manhattan. And so I came out to L.A., continuing to pursue the acting, theater, movie world. That went on for about 5 more years, and then I had an experience where I just really got burned in a way that made me fine to leave that whole business alone. And I'd been wanting to do more music, and I thought, well, this is the perfect time. And I sort of, I guess I kind of, you know, reinvented myself. I guess it's now about 5.5, 6 years ago. And I just sort of did a lot of soul searching, and I had been longing to do more music and bring that out into my life. And I decided at that point, you know, I've been trying to do a lot of things. I was a trapeze artist. I was an actress. I was a writer. I was just doing all kinds of things. I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do everything anymore. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to do music. And then I'm going to see how far I can take it instead of, you know, jack of all trades, master of none.
And did you know you were going to be doing the kind of music that you're doing now? Or were you sort of...
Yeah. Well, when I lived in Chicago and I did that folk sort of folk rock country trio, that's where I got bit by this kind of genre. And I've loved this kind of music, and I wanted to play this kind of music, and it fits my voice. Like, you know, I love Aretha Franklin, but I can't compete. Right. You know, I can't sing that way. So I was aware that whatever I was going to be doing, I needed to do what I could do well. So, and even that's been an evolution. I mean, when I started writing songs, I couldn't belt the way I can now. So, you know, and it's evolved, and it's gotten poppier with the last album. The first album was more country.
So it's another case where that you gave yourself some constraints, which is like, I'm going to do music, and I'm going to do this kind of music. I'm not going to try to do everything. And within that set of limitations, you're able to really create a substantial body of work and get a lot of... I mean, I'm looking at your schedule. You're playing like every night of the week, which is unusual. I mean, maybe not every single night, but it's usually Friday, Saturday. God, oh no, it's Monday. What the heck am I going to do? You know, so it looks like you're touring pretty heavily.
This year's been intense.
The last 2 years have been, and this particular last year has been very busy.
What I just want to ask you, I was just curious, what do you guys drive?
We drive a Honda Accord.
Oh, right. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And what do you do in the car?
What, you mean when we're to pass the time?
Do you listen to music? What do you... Yeah.
It varies.
We read books out loud a lot.
Sometimes, yeah.
We tried listening to books on tape, and that was not our thing.
Go well.
Really?
I think we might have got the wrong one, but but we just read The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh, wow.
Which was awesome. We talk.
We do listen to music sometimes. We talk. Sometimes we just sit in silence. And
we make fun of humanity.
He makes fun of humanity. I say, oh, look at the pretty sky.
Yeah.
What do you like about being on the road?
Well, I like variety. I like seeing different places. I like meeting new people.
Just as one more thing I want to do, a little magic flute. Just before we go? Yeah, just...
Oh my
yes,
gosh.
please.
Yeah.
Oh
I'm
my
excited.
gosh. Oh, wait. Okay, wait. Back in the files with the brain.
Yeah.
And point your voice downwards.
Oh my gosh.
Or something. It doesn't have to be that, but, maybe that thing from Candide or whatever. What was it, Glitter and Be Gay or something?
They want a measure of opera.
Yeah, just so people, your
Okay,
fans
I
can...
think I'm going to have to default to La Boheme because that's the only one that's actually coming into my brain.
That works for me.
Maybe I should sit up a little bit.
And maybe look away from the
It's
microphone.
going to mess up the microphone. Okay. Si mi chiamano mi perché... Oh no!
And Lucia!
Oh my gosh, it's like,
That was
that
cool.
was the
I
other
never
line.
get to hear her do that. Okay, answer me this. If she were to bust out a little moment of opera in the middle of a folk show, that would be
great.
cool, right?
Awesome. They'd love
would
it.
be
Yes.
awesome.
No.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, this is fun.
And of course, if you want to see more of where they're playing, you can look them up at www.stephaniebettman.com, and Bettman is spelled Bettman.
That's right.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Keep looking down.
Thanks.
Fly away and find your joy to the little girl and the little boy. We can hardly recognize what's true, but we know deep in our soul we're missing you as you fly away.
This is Torpedofish Radio. We've been talking with Stephanie Bettman and Luke Halpin. They have a new CD out called It All Comes Back to Love. You can find their music on stephaniebettman.com. And Bettman is spelled Bettman.